We are excited to be able to introduce to you this morning 3 couples who are endorsed for service with International Ministries, and we're going to interview them and give them the opportunity to share a little bit about themselves and their stories. Our first endorsed couple we're going to introduce to you are Debbie and Keith Myers, who are here with their children, Boyden and Bailey, who you'll meet in a few minutes. And would you welcome Keith and Debbie Myers this morning? Debbie and Keith, we're so thrilled to have you here this morning, coming from West Virginia. Yeah. Why don't you begin? Tell us a little bit about yourselves and your past experience in ministry and life back home.
Well, I was a pastor at Worthington Baptist Church, just a small country church of about 40, 50 people for about 8 years. Pastored there, and I was bivocational and also teach school. I teach elementary school, kindergarten, first grade, and second grade special education. It's really challenging. But what's really good is that this year I don't come home with bite marks or pinches or anything because that student and I are no longer together in the room. But it's just a little bit about, the call that God has put into our lives began in ministry, but then also how He's worked in working with our heart, even in the field of placing us in special education. But I've been doing that for just about 4 years now, and Deb and I, we've been married for almost 18 years. If things go good, we'll make it to August. So right now, they're looking pretty good. I haven't asked her this morning yet, but she'll get a chance to back that up here in a little bit.
Like Keith said, we've been in the ministry together, and it was totally a God thing that He put Keith and I together way back when. And over the years, I was a stay-at-home mom, and I really did not want to go back to work or go back to school and finish my education. And God was leading me to do that. And after I did, He provided me with a job where I go out and work with people. He's put a love in my heart for people. And I work with at-risk youth children and young adults and veterans with disabilities. And I work with people who are losing their jobs, trying to take that stress off of them. And through all this, God has opened up the doors of opportunity through American Baptist Women in West Virginia. I was the state coordinator for American Baptist Girls. And, they grew my roots in that and the love that they showed me to be able to show others through that.
I know that another significant part of your experience of the call have been the volunteer experiences that you had in Bolivia. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that played into your call to career service as missionaries?
Deb mentioned a little bit about roots, and when I look back over the ministry over the years, there's been so much support from our local church, through our conference, through West Virginia American Baptist. And they offer so many different opportunities for ministry. And we got the opportunity to go to a camp that our conference does, and it's called Camp Global. It happened about 3 years ago, and at that, we got to meet for the first time some individuals from International Ministries, one being Stan Slade, and then also Mario and Iris Morales. And when we spoke with Mario and Iris and we're just trying to discern this call in our lives, they said, why don't you come to Bolivia and just see what's going on there? And this was in August. And we had never left the country before. We don't speak Spanish. But in February, we were on a plane headed to Bolivia. And the interesting thing is we're on this 8-hour flight there, and I looked at Deb and realized at that point we didn't have Iris's phone number. We didn't have her address. We had never been out of the country before. So it was interesting that if we missed this flight, we're really in trouble because we had this connecting flight. So we're running through the airport and trying to be Christian with one another.
Wait a minute. I was crying at that point in time. I was mad.
So we're dragging luggage and all of this, and the kids weren't with us, so they didn't get to see that side of us at that point. But we made it with 5 minutes to spare and caught our flight. But the neat thing about it was that once we got there, you know, like when you go on vacation and you leave, and you're thinking, boy, I could live there, or maybe, you know, I'd like to stay a little bit longer. You know, missions to us has always been like that. It's always been a part of us is staying here. And really a confirmation that we received when we went to Bolivia was just the fact of the love of the people, as much as us wanting to serve people, and the opportunities that were there were just really incredible.
It was just last summer that I got to come to South Parkersburg, West Virginia, and participate in the commissioning of J.D. and Rhonda Reed for their ministry. And that was the first time I got to meet you all and your family. And although I had been to West Virginia for the biennial years ago, the warmth of the welcome in West Virginia is something special. So when you talk about loving the people, I understand where you're coming from. So tell me, as you have begun to work through this process of call, and we've been talking about that all weekend here, do you ever have any doubts creep in?
You know, God puts those spiritual markers all through your life. And, you know, maybe in the beginning we had a doubt, but as time has gone on, he's given us confirmation, one right after the other. And especially when we went on our vision trip last fall to Mexico, and we were with the people in Puebla and you know, in Oaxaca and all those areas. You know, those people, they gave us their best. And it was very humbling to us because we were like, God, we don't deserve that. You know, but they opened up their arms, and that was the confirmation for our family for Mexico. But the confirmation that God had given us as a family to international missions was when we came back from Bolivia the second time. We had taken the kids with us. And it was about 2 months after that, and Boyden came out of the bathroom, and he had these big crocodile tears coming down his face. And, you know, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, is there blood? Did he start, you know, was he shaven the first time? And, you know, so I'm looking at him, I'm like, buddy, what's wrong? And Keith and I were standing in the kitchen, and he goes, I miss ministering to the people in Bolivia. And so that was a confirmation for us as a family that the kids were okay with us too. You know, because we didn't want to uproot them and take them somewhere where they weren't willing to go. And, you know, and then we just started really praying and discerning that. God, where do you want us in this big world of yours? Because you already have a place for us. Just show us where.
Deb, you just mentioned a vision trip. And the vision trip is an opportunity we provide shortly after endorsement for individuals or couples who will be serving in a country they've never visited previously, to go and to meet their partners, to become acquainted with the culture and the place they'll be serving. And so you did your vision trip to Mexico shortly after you were endorsed. What difficulties did you experience with the language barrier? You mentioned that you don't speak Spanish yet.
I know enough to get to the bathroom. I think that's very important, you know. Necesito el baño. And, you know, and people are like, oh, yeah, there, you know. I can't tell you which is right and left, but, you know. But one of the interesting things, first we landed in Mexico City on a Saturday over Thanksgiving, and that was confusing because there were two different places, and we were in one place, and the people who were picking us up were in another. So we decided that, okay, we realized that after we talked to some people, so we moved over to their side, and they moved to ours. So it was like 3 hours in this airport, so we just sat there. It was like, okay, they'll find us eventually. And then the next morning at 4:30 in the morning, we were on in a van with two guys from the area that we're going to be ministering in, and they speak as much English as we do Spanish. So we were with them from 4:30 in the morning till about midnight that night. So it was you know, quite humorous to communicate during the day. But one of the things that we were standing in the evening at this church outside. And a gentleman named Lazaro, he was standing there, and he was talking to the kids, and he said, you would like to live in Mexico? Or, yes. And the kids, they thought he said, leave Mexico. So they were going, no, we don't want to leave. And he was thinking that they wanted, you know, that they didn't want to live there. And he said, yeah, I like my country too. And then I started thinking about it a little bit later. I'm like, oh no, he was saying leave and he meant live, and So that was one of those things that, it really helps to know the language where you're going.
In that vision trip experience, what were some of the most beneficial parts of that experience for you?
When we went, we wanted to speak with the pastors and speak with just what opportunities were there and see how God was working and what the ministry might look like when we do get there. And so one of the things that I was intentional about asking the pastors was, what is your vision for your community? Because the areas that we'll be working in are 6 different areas, and they're different cultures in themselves, and with different languages, 6 different languages, and their second language as well as Spanish. So in speaking to these pastors, we was wanting to know, what's your vision? Where do you see the church going? And the interesting thing that we found out about it is that the vision that they have where we're going to be ministering doesn't look much different than the same ministry that we had when we were the pastor at Worthington. It doesn't look much different than if you go to any typical church in the United States. The vision there was the same. There was a lot of passion to how do we effectively reach out to our community? How do we take the gospel of Jesus Christ out to our community? How do we be a safe place for the community to come in and to feel like, hey, this is a place for us to gather? And then at the same time, how do we study the Word of God and understand it in a way that's applicable to reach out, that's practical to reach out to people. So I think that was really the most beneficial thing that we picked up, was the fact that it doesn't really look much different than actually our ministry that we've been doing for 15 plus years. So that was a great confirmation there. And it also put us a lot at ease that it wasn't going to be like rocket science. It's the same thing that we're doing here. It's just in a different culture and in a different country.
You just mentioned culture. Were there some cultural differences between West Virginia and Mexico?
Well, I think we're going to be ministering to the hillbillies of Mexico, so, and there are so many different cultures in West Virginia in itself, from the northern part to the southern part of the state. But, there are a lot of differences, and Bailey, she saw her first animal slaughtered in Mexico. It was on Thanksgiving Day, and they were slaughtering a turkey, and we have a picture of her. And the look on her face was like, are you kidding me? Because she's our animal lover, And it's like, you're not supposed to do that to animals. And so the cultural differences, one of the other things that we learned, that modesty is not in doing it, but it's not in looking. So if someone's doing something, you just don't look that way, and I think that was one of the differences. And I'm an on-time person, so I cannot stand to be late. And, we learned in Bolivia when we went, and then in Mexico, if you have something at 10 o'clock, it's okay if it starts at 11, and I am like, are you serious? So there's a lot of different things that, that we're going to have to adjust to when we get to Mexico.
When we were in Bolivia with Iris, we were going to a church service, and we pulled up beside this house, had a wall around it, and she beeped, and nobody came out, and so she beeped again, and nobody came out, and a few minutes went by, and she beeped again, and this little lady, she came out, and she opened up the door, or the gate, and she opened it up, and she said, "You're on American time," and slammed the gate and left. And it was like another 20 minutes or so that we sat there.
Jim mentioned that this year of endorsement in your pre-field training helps you gain the information that you need to get ready to go to your field of service. So what information do you have now that you wish you'd had before your endorsement?
Well, I got to back up. When we were in Mexico, one of the things that we've learned over this past year is that we need to ask a lot of questions. And it's okay to ask questions because there's no dumb question. And when we were in Mexico for that week on our vision trip, we told the kids and ourselves, just try everything that they put in front of you. But if you don't like it, then you don't have to eat it. Well, we were trying to be polite and finish our plates, and they kept bringing out more food. Well, we were leaving on Saturday, and on Friday, Chuck Shaver, he said, oh yeah, by the way, you shouldn't have eaten everything on your plate. You need to leave a little bit on there so that they won't bring out more food. We're like, you should have told us that on Saturday, But, this endorsement time has been really good for us because, we're getting lots of different training, and you have to look deep inside of yourself and see who you are and who you are in Christ. And that's one of the most beneficial things for us.
What are some of the challenges that you're finding in this stage right now in terms of forming your missionary partnership network?
There are good things about it, and they seem like challenges now, but it's those challenges that we know in the long run are going to be good things. And the reason I say that is I have a friend of mine he's my accountability partner, and on Sunday night we talk, and he's a Southern Baptist pastor, and he kind of jabs me every now and then, and he'll say, Keith, if you're Southern Baptist, you'd already be in the mission field. And I thought about that statement several times when he would say it a year or so ago, and as I thought about it, and we started doing our presentations, and we're out and speaking to these churches, one thing that really was that we have gained so much from this, and I say this in our presentation, is the fact that we're looking at each other in the eye. We're able to go out, and you're able to see that we're just ordinary people, that have answered a call from God. There's nothing spectacular about us. There's nothing different than you and me, and we get the opportunity to go out, and missions is so much about building relationships and so much about getting to know people and know individuals. And I would say that's been, even though right now it seems like each month we get our financial report that it just is moving through a lot of mud because it seems really slow. We know at the same time, we're building these relationships, and they're going to be lifelong relationships. We have so many people now that when you meet them and you haven't seen them in a year, and all of a sudden you see them again and you feel like, hey, we just saw each other last week, or I've known you all my life. So many relationships have gotten built that way. And I would say that's probably the most beneficial thing and the most blessing that we've received, is the love that we've received, the passion that we've received from people, and their love for missions, and being able to put a face with your missionary. Then they're taking ownership. We feel like they're taking ownership of who we are as a family. One of the important things, too, that we've tried to do throughout this entire process is involve our kids. They're involved with our presentation. They're involved with really everything that we do. And they've always been, we've had them all across the United States since they've been in diapers, doing missions. And so that's really the best thing.
So tell me the story about Boyden and the lady in the prayer card.
We were at a church and speaking, and we decided to change up our presentation a little bit, not hand everybody a prayer card. So Keith was out, and he told, right before we had gone to speak that evening, he said, okay, kids, I'm going to give you the cue, and I'm going to ask people if they would like a prayer card to raise their hand. And so the kids forgot, and I forgot, and I kind of was like, okay, it's time for you to hand out prayer cards. And then Boyden was handing it to this little lady on the front row, and Keith said, no, not now. And so Boyden grabbed it from her. He took it back and went and sat down. And then later on that evening, she really wanted to give him a hug. We had a little reception, and she grabbed a hold of him, and they both were going backwards because she had gotten him off balance. And luckily, Keith was there. Her eyes were huge. Boyden's eyes were huge because, we would have broke somebody's bones. And so Keith grabbed a hold of him. So that's the lady in the prayer card, and Boyden, she just really wanted to grab a hold of him and love on him.
Well, I hope you all have the opportunity through the remainder of the week to get to know Keith and Debbie and Boyden and Bailey a little more. They'll be doing a workshop later in the week about their ministry. We've got a special treat. We're going to be joined on stage now by Boyden and Bailey, as well as by Dago and Delia Zalea, another of our endorsed couples, and they're going to teach us a song in Spanish.